Oh, this sounds perfect. It sounds perfect for the students, and it sounds really exciting for you, I gotta say.
Yeah. Great. It's a great fit for me. You know, I taught at other universities, and they were fine schools. WPI for me is absolutely a perfect fit. And I have other faculty, you know, colleagues from different institutions who are like, I would never, ever want to like do those types of projects, you know? And so like, so, I mean, that's fine. You know, like, what do you do if you're teaching a music class and you have someone that quite literally knows nothing about music, you know, like they just, and that happens all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I want to make effed up beats, you know, like someone and, you know, and say something like that. And like, okay, fine. I can work with that. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, my background is as like a rocker first, you know, like my interest in classical music and all of this other stuff grew out of my interest in like, I'm from the 90s, so like 90s alt rock and
like Cool and stuff, that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, but like even like more simple, like bands like Weezer, like when.
Oh yeah.
So
yep.
I think I was like 11 when the Blue album came out, and I got that album. My older brother got it. We grew up in kind of a sheltered religious house, so we couldn't really get a lot of music. So like yeah. like the only family that snuck in Weezer, that controversial band, you know. So we had Weezer, and then like U2 kind of blurred the lines of what was around, and also I'm trying to think with the Cranberries. So like yeah. So like, you know, these types of bands, my interest in that type of music grew in you know, I started thinking about like what other types of music is out there. So like alt rock led to classic rock led to progressive rock, bands like Rush and Yes. And then I really did reach this point in my life where I was like, well, what's more prog than prog rock?
Yes.
And that was it, you know. And then I discovered like Bach and other like Rachmaninoff and Mahler and like all of these other things. Like I got used to the instrumentation, you know, that took a while, but then that was it. And that is a love affair that has persisted to this day. And so I approach classical music in a really weird way. And I do feel like a lot of students could get into that too and see that. I generally have people who follow a similar path. They're, you know, they show up in my class with a Yes T-shirt on, you know, or something like that. Their dad likes, you know, Led Zeppelin.
Crimson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a place for everyone in my class, and you know, if they're interested in that trajectory, there's a lot of great music that has existed for, you know, thousands of years, really hundreds of years. There's exceptional stuff out there that is different than, you know, fundamentally different than what's on the radio now, you know, and not to denigrate that, but, you know, there's a lot that we missed. I tell them, I'm still in the Baroque time period. I'm still trying to play catch up. There's a lot that I missed, you know. There's one guy, Bach, his catalog is like a lifetime's worth of music. How could I possibly listen to that? Yeah, so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's really exciting. I think, I mean, like I'm completely outside this whole realm, right? So I kind of wander into this course we're running. And so last semester, it kind of developed itself as we were going along. And at one point we said, oh, well, let's throw in a week of like generative music. And so we're like, oh, well, you guys know Brian Eno. And they're like, who?
Who's Brian?
Like, what?
Yeah.
And they went wild. They just totally flipped over this stuff. And it's so fascinating to be able to turn somebody on to something like that, you know, like a whole wall of music.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So like for some of us, that stuff was coming out. It's like when you binge Netflix, it's like, you know, you get it all at once. Fantastic. You know, but like, you know, for some people, it was coming out over the course of several years, you know, but to be able to just have this all, fantastic.
Brian Eno's awesome. Yes, agreed.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, and I want to respect your time. So, you know, I mean, it's a weird semester with Zoom and everything. And I'm afraid we may not, you know, we may have people dropping in. We may have to just kind of use this recording if that's okay with you. You know, that'd be best for us.
Yeah.
So let's kick it off. Is there let's do a formal introduction.
Sure.
We're doing local perspectives on electronic music this semester. We did global perspectives last semester. So we're tapping the talents of people who either live in Philadelphia now or spend a lot of time in Philadelphia. And we're very happy to say VJ Manzo fits that bill, even though he's wandered a little bit up north. Yes. I think his part of your heart is still in Philadelphia.
It is, absolutely.
And this is the same VJ Manzo you'll see on textbook after textbook after textbook on musical technology, on Macs, on programming, on combining those together and bringing music and electronic music to a whole range of people. So, VJ, we're so grateful to have you spend time with us today.
I'm so honored to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. In case anyone's wondering, it's all a complete fluke. I don't know how this happened. I will tell you that the guiding principle here for me has just been go with what's interesting and just go toward that. That is you'll never if you throw it. I say to my students every term, I'm just throwing darts at the wall. And some of the darts stick, and that's great. And then some of the darts don't stick, and that's also great. But you got to try things. And there are many pursuits that I've tried that I say after a few months and a valiant effort, that's a discipline that I'll just kind of admire from a distance. And then there are some that really just absolutely changed the fiber of my being. And I guess that's sort of how I got into tech. I am, as I was saying earlier, I am more of a traditional rocker, and I like pop rock. I like just rock music in general. I got into classical music really because I wanted to go to college and learn more about music. And the school where I was interested in applying, they had a classical guitar program. And they didn't have like a jazz. Some schools now have jazz programs and rock guitar programs and things like that. So I wanted to learn about fingerstyle guitar playing, and there I was, like in my senior year of high school. I didn't know how to read music at all, and that was like so completely foreign to me, and I just didn't get it. But I just, it was interesting. So
so let me stop you there, though, because we're a community college. So we have a lot of students who are at that point, right? Sure. They don't really know what to do. They're not signed on to a trajectory or a life path. And it takes a lot of bravery to do what you're describing. What did that feel like? How did you... Did you torment yourself, or did you just throw caution to the wind? And
I am very empathetic with that. And even though now it was many, many years ago, it was decades ago, I remember literally the night before we were going to this school in New Jersey, where I'm from. It was called the Calderon School of Music, and this woman had a sort of reputation for wayward souls like me. It was a legit music school for people who wanted to be serious and try to go into college. And here I was, like in my last year of high school. I went to a small school where there was no music program, and so I knew how to play tunes from listening to things off the radio and what they would describe now sort of reverentially as informal music learning. It didn't feel very prestigious for me. I have a younger brother who plays the bass, and we kind of made up our own music theory. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. We just didn't know. So
look, these work together.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we would play in, my dad has a church, and we would play in the church group, probably like many of your students, do. And that's also an environment where you typically don't get handed a thing of sheet music and say, like, go read this. It's very felt and very kind of, go with the flow, and they don't slow down for you either. That's the other thing that, I think it's like a kind of a great practice that you're playing with these people, this veteran bass player dude who's just doing whatever. You're trying to keep up with him, like 6 chords. So that was my background. When I went to this school the night before, and this is absolutely not a lie, the night before I went to this school for the first time, I had a dream that I was in a giant helicopter, and I looked down into the water, and there was this gigantic fish thing that I could see in the water. I can't believe I'm even telling you this story, because it's cool. But I'm just going with it.
Anxiety dream beyond.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't thought about this in like 20 years, by the way. So there was some giant manta ray thing in there, and the person there said to me, I said, well, what is that? And the person in the helicopter said, if you want to know what that is, you got to jump in. And I remember saying, "Aw, F it," in the dream. And then I jumped out of the helicopter, and that is not that. Now it's kind of like an attitude, but at the time that was not really my sensibility about that. I was kind of shy, and I mean it was a little eccentric, as you could probably tell from all this. But you know, it was weird to be 17, 18 and playing Polly Wolly Doodle Duck, and buttons, so but you just eat your spinach, and you get past that, and then eventually you find that I really love this stuff, and there's a lot of music out there that maybe I'm not so fond of, but that's okay. I'll play that stuff too, so that I built up the skills to learn how to do these other things.
And just to put this in perspective, so I know these things from your website, but can you tell our students, so for example, at this point, like how many pieces of work have you composed? How many, where has this career where has that initial jump from the helicopter taken you?
Oh, like now? Oh, yeah. I've done a lot of things. I am still following my interests. So I compose, I still compose like rock songs. I compose music I play the electric guitar. I love the electric guitar. It took me a while to kind of come back to the idea that you can tell people professionally that you play the electric guitar and not look down apologetically at your shoes, like there's something inferior about it. I do play fingerstyle on the electric guitar, which is kind of interesting.
Wow.
I mean, it's fun for me. There are a lot of different things that I find interesting. So I still write music a fair amount. I'm very much interested in developing little apps, and mostly everything that I do is like need-based for myself. I sometimes get projects, and this is something we do at our institution too. We offer a couple slots for people who come in with an idea and want us to help them facilitate that idea in some way. So, but for the majority, I have a shopping list of ideas, and yeah, and like I said before, I don't want to over romanticize this. Some of the ideas don't work. Some of them, but we do it and we try it, and there's a lot to be learned in that, and that's okay.
So I have to say, I mean, this could have been an interview, and at some point we'll have Max code on the screen and everything, but I just find you fascinating, and I think this is a message that's so critical for our students, because we're at such a chaotic time right now on almost every axis, right? That people feel really unhinged, and it's not easy to see a path. There's no clear step 1, step 2 path to the future. So to see somebody who is saying the things you're saying, look, I took a jump. I tried it. Yeah. Hey, look, not everything I try works out, but that's okay. Hey, there are people who maybe would look at this and look down at me, but that Teflon's off me because I don't care about that. I'm doing
That's exactly it. And, look, the three of us, we've all arrived at this knowledge, this realization. And if you're a teenager, early 20s listening to this, that is absolutely it. We were all there feeling that apprehension about taking a risk. But this, relatively speaking, if you think about the whole timeline of humanity, this is a pretty safe bet,
Right, that's a good point.
You're not on the food chain now,
it could always be worse.
Yeah.
Worse, yeah. So the worst case scenario is you have to restart your computer, or you lose some,
That's right.
and when you think about how your time gets invested with so many other things, I mean, this is kind of the weird absurdity, not to go down this path, but you have no problem spending an extra $50 on a bad movie and stale popcorn. Yeah. I mean, when things are open, but then when it's $40 for some little plugin that you will use for the next 8 years of your life. I don't know. It's just insane. If you eat, I'm vegan, so I don't eat this, but if you eat fewer Whoppers and extra value meals, that's how I always budget it. All right, I could buy this other thing if I just have, not if I don't supersize this thing,
So that's maybe a good test, like a test of your passion. Like if this is your passion, you'd be willing to give up your favorite piece of pizza to your favorite pizza night to go this route. But I think you're right. I mean, it's not the food chain that we're afraid of. It's not the tiger coming through the crack in the wall. It's the mishigas. It's the stuff in your mind, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I have not forgotten what it's like to be an undergraduate student and to be thinking, I'm going to leave this program and who is going to want me? Is there going to be anything out there for me? And that's pretty scary. I am very empathetic, and even though I'm laughing and I'm kind of making jokes, I don't trivialize it. It's scary. It's a scary time. But as the old song says, there's a place for us. There is a place for you, and it's never too late to work 9 to 5. And from this vantage point, I can see that the more important thing is find some things that are fulfilling to you. Maybe even just find some things that are not fulfilling to you to scratch them off your list. But you got to keep trying and try out new things all the time.
So what was it like for you to kind of become this cross field specialist? So you can imagine that there might be a problem, right? That people on the music side, we've seen this at our institution, right? People on the music side are like, oh, that's not music. Like it doesn't, you don't blow on it and you don't that's not music. And people on the computer science side are like, oh, that's very cute. Like you're connecting things with patch cables. That's adorable. Like someday you'll grow into, something a little more serious.
Yeah, exactly. I have not forgotten. I have a pretty high threshold of being able to be not taken seriously. And I know that particularly when I was in graduate school, when I was getting into programming, I had to be okay with doing things that only I felt were interesting and not needing external validation. Surely I was fortunate to have people in my life that were like, VJ, I don't know what you're talking about, but I can tell that you're enthusiastic about it and just go with it. And if you're listening and you need that sounding board, that's me. Just picture the virtual VJ, giving you that encouragement. I don't know what you're doing. So I can show you an example of that if I can share.
Yeah, someone asked a question maybe as you're doing that. I was wondering how you combine your interest in your current work, maybe even in how you authored your books.
Okay. Yes. So all of my books generally have come from stuff that I've riffed about in class, ideas that have come up by speaking with people, and problems and things that people have wanted to see. So whether those people are me and my friends, or mostly everything that I do comes from, in terms of programming and projects, all that comes from people saying like, what stinks, or would be good if we had a thing that did this. And so then I do that. I actually can't share my screen.
Oh.
Yay.
That's okay.
Well, let me.
When you see what I'm sharing, it might not be worth all the effort, but
no, I just hit the button. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, no worries.
I don't know. We promoted you to co-host and host. I guess we have to make you like God of the universe or something to.
Yes. Okay. Can you see this thing?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So this is. It would be good if you just lowered your expectations quite a bit about what this is going to be, because this is like one of my first things that I was doing when I was programming. So it all starts with like having some idea about what it is that you want to do. We probably all know people who have lots of skills and like, I know 10 different languages. I know, all these different things, but it all comes down to like the idea. And so my idea with this piece, and again, this is not like the end of it all. This was quite literally the start of it. My thought was, I want to play a Bach invention, which is like a 2-part piece. And I use a MIDI file to do that. I just started playing. And you can hear that, right? Yep. Okay, cool. So what's happening here is there's this little bucket. It's collecting all the pitches that are being played.
So that's a histogram.
A The histogram, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, so it's finding out what's going on here, and then when it's all good and done, it's going to play back the same MIDI file again, but instead of playing the pitches that Bach used, it's going to randomly choose pitches based on what was more frequently played according to the histogram in there too. So it's just collecting. It's a real-time thing. Nothing here is pre-recorded. It was just an experiment in kind of like a real-time thing to see what results from this whole endeavor. And this is all done in Max. If you're not familiar with Max, I can show you a little crash course of what that looks like. But eventually it's going to stop and it's going to start the new piece. And again, don't be prepared to be overwhelmed. So here we go. Here's the new piece now. So, there is something that, there's something that's kind of unique about that for what it is. I don't anticipate winning any Pulitzer Prizes over that. And that takes a while to get to that point. I remember, I guess, October 11th, 2006. So, I've improved my methods quite a bit since then. But I remember how long this took. I remember being excited it was finished. And I remember what it was like to show it to people. And they were like, oh, great, So, but you know what? That's what it takes. That's what it takes. And we're all on this path now where, you've committed several years to your institution, and that it's just the milestones. Here I am now. I'm able to show back to this piece. I get a lot of mileage out of this piece. Would it be helpful to take a look at what Max looks like so you get kind of familiar with that, or does everyone pretty much know?
They're just starting out. So we've done a week of Visi. They're doing their first kind of audio reactive piece in Visi and Beep. So kind of lifting the hood a little and looking into Max would be great at this point. And let me ask you, VJ, so when you were digging your way through that, when we hit a wall, we pick up a book by VJ Manzo and we leaf through the book, but that wasn't there then. So what tricks, what strategies do you have for people who are trying to do something new, at least new to them? And, is it just the regular old go to YouTube and Google around?
Well, I'm going to sound old here, but when I was doing this, YouTube was just getting started, so that didn't really exist. And so here's my basic thing. If you find a patch that you like, and there are plenty of examples that come baked into Max, which is great, just break it, take it apart, and when it breaks, you've gone too far. You've gone one too far at that point. So, I mean, one of my favorite things, you can still see my screen, right?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about Max is I'll do random. So if I said to you, hey, there's an object inside of Max where you can say this thing random and say all right, here's 128. And that's it's going to spit out random numbers between 0 and 128 if you do that. If you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting, tell me more, then you can just look at the help file for that and, literally open up the help file. And, you probably already know this, but this is a working patch. Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. And then you can just lift that, so you can make whole patches just by looking up the help files for things. And then even if you get kind of close, if you're I'm looking for something kind of randomish, but it's not really like that, you can, now it's a question mark. You can go over to the little thing here and you can see these are kind of close to that other one. So there's an object called the drunk object that is kind of random, but it has a little bit of a give as to where, where it's going to go, deviation. So look, we've all been in this position where you're oh, it's a new language. Do I have to read a manual? I'm going to read a thing and then do it. But that doesn't work for me so well. So I'm kind of, how do I learn it while I'm doing it? And I would think that a lot of people are like that too. The references in Max are pretty good. But I'm let's figure it out while it's going on. So you can make whole patches just by stringing things together and then just trying out other things. And it's a daunting task to get to know a new language, but you get to know kind of what you need to know pretty quick. And you can start to get your favorites. And here's one of the interesting things that you mentioned Visi, and which is fantastic because it points to one of my favorite concepts about musicianship and programming and just life is just make your tools. And like your tools have to work. Like when I'm doing something, it has to make one guy happy. Like that's it. Like and of course, like we always use best practices, but I remember going to the first Max conference that they had in San Francisco, and David Ziccarelli got up there and he was speaking to us, and he kind of said like, you all make the same Max patch over and over again every single day. And I thought like, oh, wow, true. I'm wasting my life, and, but there's this thing, there's truth to that. Like how many times do you need to do the same note in to a K slider to that or that? Like at this point, if you've been playing around with Max for a few weeks, you're probably starting to figure out some of the things that you like to do with Max. So instead of having to redo that all over again, just you can just come up with some ways to encapsulate those things. Like you can highlight this thing and then click encapsulate, or and then it becomes a thing where you can do like B patchers, and B patchers are effectively what Visi is. There's just a patch within a patch. So all those things are really useful. And so one of the first things that I was doing, and by the way, without really knowing a whole lot about Max, one of the first things I started doing was starting to build the tools that I found to be most relevant. So like I said, you look at the help files, look at those things, you find other people's patches that work and kind of hack them apart, and then assemble the types of tools that you would find be most interesting. So I made this, first it was just what they would call an abstraction, which is just an object inside of a little subpatcher. And then I turned it into like an actual C external with the help of a friend. So this thing does this. I'll zoom in because it's probably a little bit tiny. All right, so Max is great, and I love it, and I use Max every single day. Who saw that coming? I didn't. But one of the things that it doesn't do is it doesn't like it doesn't say, and diatonic 7-note scales are the way to go. They just don't make there's certainly no aversion to. They know that those things exist, but they don't want to pigeonhole you into Western tonal music. So, but I like Western tonal music. So I made this thing that you can just say like C, where you can give it a pitch class E, and then you can say major or minor, and it gives you pitch classes for these scales. And so now we've got like the building blocks of chords. So that was a tool that I made, and one that didn't exist at the time. And when I did that, I remember showing other people at NYU, like, look, I made this thing that gives you all of the scales. And by the way, like, just to point it out again, like it does modes, like music theory nerd, like it does like all the different variations of modes, like modes based on minor scales and melodic minor scale and something like that. So, no one is like beating down the door like, I need the Locrian flat 6 scale. No one's asking for that. But it kind of meant something to me. And even more blank stares when you start showing people. Like, look, okay, so like here's like another thing I did. I made this thing where like you can give, like, so then I build off these things. So like then I have this thing that like lets you have a scale, and then you could set like a scale that says like I'll just zoom in a little bit more. Cool. All right. So then you say like C major, what they would call Ionian. And then this is really nerdy, so just buckle up. So every scale has 7 unique notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then the 8th one is a repeat of the next one. And then every scale has that. There's a certain pattern of where they are and of how the notes factor in with each other. If you picture a piano, you can see steps in between them. A major scale happens to be whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's the flavor of that scale. Another mode will have a different set of steps in there too. So that's how scales play out in real life. And then whatever note you start on is what they would call the tonic, that scale. So for every single scale, here was my idea. And to me, it was interesting. Other people, not so much. So the idea was that when you say C major scale, you populate this list of all of the modes that seems to be flying off screen. So I'm going to move it over a little bit. Let's see. I have to share my. I'm having a screen sharing technical difficulty. There we go.
Yeah, this whole Zoom thing is an art.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll share the other. Come on now. The menu is popping up off screen. I have 2 monitors. All right, let me share my other screen. How about that?
Yeah, let's try that.
Cool. All right. Groovy. All right, so now you see that? Yep. Okay, yeah. Cool. So for every mode you select, it gives you all of the modes that share 6 of 7 notes in common with that one mode. So, that why would anyone ever want to do that? You can modulate by virtue of doing it. You can get to other keys. So I that wasn't nerdy enough. I then built this this little piece off of that, and the idea was that I would be able to zip through every single mode in every single tonic. Again, it starts in C major, and then it's going to roll through that, and then it's going to choose the next one on the list and do that, and it's going to go through the whole list. So you're getting this common tone modulation over all of them, and then you don't want to listen to this all day, so you just kind of if you do it really fast, it sounds like Pac-Man. And so this was actually for a competition that, everyone, that's what happens. So eventually it'll stop. It'll go through every single, so it'll go through every single scale eventually, and it'll do this common tone modulation. And this was for a piece where the goal was to get it every single mode, every single tonic in 60 seconds. And I succeeded in doing that. And, again, no one's going to be writing books about that, but that was a step towards something else. And you could see that prompted the assembly of this tool, that then is pretty interesting, because then if you are going to compose something and you're in C major and you want to know okay, well, where can I go if I want to get from here to here? And so you kind of have these tools built in place.
So there are 3 things that are jumping out to me, right? The first thing is this, how music and mathematics are good bedfellows, right? And I think that's why you see so many computer scientists having this natural proclivity or this attraction to music, because right? So you've shown this sequence of numbers is what it means to be C Ionian or C major. Yeah. That's what it is. It's a sequence of numbers here. So that I think explains some of the cross-fertilization there. The other thing that's fascinating, right, is the messages that you hear in your mind. So you are doing things that are great tools for you, and you're happy to share them, but you're not deterred if other people say, oh, and aren't thrilled with them. And that kind of resiliency, I think, is really important for anybody in whatever field you're in, because anybody who's going to do something original is going to need that.
Totally, absolutely. You have to be okay with kind of approaching the weird here, and yeah, it's, to me, I knew I was onto something, and now I can look back and people can applaud that, but like I said, at the time, I remember people just being either I completely don't get it, or what's the practicality of this, and I'm a musician. We all play these things, what they call etudes, these studies, and they're not always something that you write home about, but it's part of the path, and that's part of what it is. And as educators, particularly as college professors, we're probably really used to, and as college students too, you hear these conversations with people about return on investment, and you're going to commit 2 years of your life. If you were you're spending money to go to MCCC, and what are you going to get in return? oh my gosh, like unbelievable. Like who can answer that, you know?
Right, the pressure.
Yeah, I remember being 18 and being like, wow, I need to figure out what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life now, like before I get enrolled. That who can handle that, you know? And you know, this is why so many parents ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? We're looking for answers. We don't know either. You know, that's a joke. But you know, it's, you have to be okay with embracing the ambiguity and embracing the idea that this may crash and burn, you know? I mean, look, you just saw two things now that were ideas that took hours and hours of my time that are just blips as part of a talk, you know, as like a stepping stone. And here, this is, I brought this up, you can see this, right? So this is like another one that was part of that. The idea, and this is why I always get back to the idea. Like, just think about what would be an interesting musical experience. I had a composition professor who gave me two really important bits of advice. The first one was a little bit nihilistic. He said, you know, silence is so rare, like in life, to actually just be quiet. Like, why do you want to compose anything?
Well, that's subversive. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, why do anything? Yeah. I mean, but then the other thing was, and this is really like a guiding principle for me. Like, think about the people, the audience that you care about. And you could do it right now. You think about whoever just popped in your mind. It could be family members. It could be just people that in your frat or sorority or friends. Think about those people that you care about. Think about the type of experience, musical experience that you, or multimedia experience you want them to have. Do you want to do something that's going to wow them? Do you want to do something that's going to kind of move them? And if it's move them in what way? Do you want to do something that's just going to kind of make them laugh and, you know, realize that there is beauty and good in the world and be reminded of that? Then that's fine. Just think about what that experience is, and then do that thing, find the tools or build the tools to do that thing. This particular system here, I was getting very interested in, I didn't really explore a lot of jazz as a kid, and it's a genre of music that I admire, but one that it still, even now, feels somewhat foreign to me. But I am an admirer of jazz. So one of the things I thought was very interesting was I was looking at these certain jazz players that were coming up with solos based on like what note they weren't playing in the scale. It was kind of just a bizarre way of thinking about it. So like if you think about a 7-note scale, this system right here, if I'm playing, I don't know if you can see on my camera, I'm playing the note C. And then what you're actually getting down here is every note in the scale, like except for C, exactly, the complementation, yeah. So so the way that this works, I'll allow the velocity from my keyboard to come through, because you can get these kind of like really big chords to kind of come through. And so
that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. So like then here's where you lose all of your time. So then there's a guy named David Cope who was really, he's worth checking out. He was really one of these early pioneers in algorithmic composition and with the notion of using computers and this, and he's still with us. He's really just a fascinating guy. Definitely check him out, David Cope. So he said to me one time, and you've probably heard this before, that, you know, programming is like, you know, 1% function, 99% window dressing. And, you know, the concept of like how you're going to do that, play a note, gives you everything else. You know, yeah, you can whip that out in, you know, in a long weekend. But to make it functional, to get it so that you can play any scale, you know, or any key and do that. And then how is it harmonizing? Well, you can do this kind of probability of like, where is the bass note going to go? So I'm playing the same note over again. And it's just revoicing the chord in different ways, you know, depending on how it adds a little bit of randomness in there. And of course you can then say like, well, I want to alternate voices 3, 4, and 5, you know, or I want to do this, or, you know, how does it actually go? So when all is said, thank you. And by the way, if you don't know how to play an instrument, like, hey, now you can do these kind of like tall, jazzy chords. So, so I use that to make like a piece out of it. And the thing that I played on the keyboard, because I'm not a very good keyboard player. The thing I played was Beethoven Ode to Joy. You know that thing? That da 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 da. This is, it's just playing through all of the, the chords and all of the notes in that melody. It's doing it. And I can actually play you a little rendering, because once it's done, once you have that done, you can do something like this and then get some people to play it. I'm not sure how well this will come out through Zoom audio, but so in the interest of time, I'll just kind of pause it there. But that didn't exist, and then like suddenly, as a result of this, this system and this idea, like it did exist, and then it's pretty awesome, I don't know. I'm just
really
that's
awesome.
crazy cool. So these also, it's fascinating to me because so that falls into the category of like compositional tools, right? Like things that are helping a computer helping a human being understand the large number of next steps that you could take in your composition. But part of your career has been on the other end of the spectrum too. So working with really young kids, and that's kind of an interesting area for me, is thinking about like, could music be the stepping stone into computer science? Right. And you've done a lot of work in that field as well. I mean, so it's interesting that both of those like different ends of the spectrum in terms of complexity would be of interest to you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So here, can I show you something else? So I started this project, where is it? Called EAMIR. Okay, so here's the background of this sort of thing. So like while I was doing these like music theory things, I was also teaching middle school and really elementary school, middle school music. And I was doing it in a school where we didn't really have much of a budget at all for things. But I was getting interested in Macs, and I really liked this idea that anything could trigger notes, and without sounding too heady, you could separate the physical actions of playing from kind of the cognitive ones of the average kid doesn't know about modes really, or scales and stuff like that, and you can teach them how it does that. But the whole point of this project was to get them using like video game controllers and gestural types of things and stepping on little Dance Dance Revolution pads and other types of controllers. They all just pumped data into these Max patches that I was writing. And then I knew that I could put them into like a diatonic setting, get them to play all in the same key. And if you took piano lessons as a kid, like maybe you had a teacher who put little stickers on all the good notes that you were allowed to play. So that's what this was getting interested in developing all these tools. And this is all open source. You can get this on GitHub. The whole project is there. In fact, if you have Macs on your computer, you can go to the package manager and just, you can search for EAMIR and you'll get this whole software development kit. And in fact, I can show you what it looks like if you'd like to see it. But it's free. It's got all the stuff that I showed today in there, and it just installs, and you can pull it from the extras menu inside of Macs. But it has the tools that I use to build these things. So here's what it looks like when it loads up. Ta-da. I'll minimize that too. So it's like there's MIDI basics, like instead of having all of this stuff that, does your MIDI in stuff, like I don't need to do that every single day of my life. Like now there's this thing that does MIDI in, and then there's like a thing that does MIDI out, and I just connect two things and done. Which
is really one of the biggest ideas in computer science, right? Absolutely. I mean, that's a critical idea, this idea of packaging and encapsulating and than just putting it on the shelf. This is the heart of the whole idea of object-oriented paradigm.
Totally, absolutely. So like with this kit, when you talk about like kids getting into computer science, this is, in my opinion, this is pretty good scaffolding, because then like, a student could work with something like this, where, it's getting data from a mouse, like with your position from a mouse, and then it goes to this thing that kind of scales it, scales it to a pitch, and then this thing that scales it to a velocity, and then this thing that sticks it into a key. Like you can put a bunch of these things in place. Like you could give them just this part, and then they say, well, I want to use just my, I don't know, my PlayStation controller, my Wii remote or whatever. And then you can just focus on that part and then plug it into some other things. So instead of it being every single project being this daunting task of, oh gosh, where do I begin? You can just focus on small modular things and then plug it into other, other types of things. So this whole kit is all about that sort of thing. Like you can use, this is my favorite one. I use this one all the time. Again, it's the same MIDI out thing. This is like a thing that does chord voicings. This thing does chords. And this is, this one, like, okay, so there's no really elegant way for me to do this. Or I shouldn't say that. This is, I just put on a pot of coffee and decided I'm going to make it look like a keyboard. And so now whenever you press any key on here, even if you press like the shift key or do capitals, it's going to blink different things. And then, okay, kids, what would you like to do with these things? And like, you've got all these blinking things. What would you like to map these things to,
So we started one lecture with a video from Steve Duda, who wrote Serum, right? And so he said, look, at one point somebody said to me, like, are you going to just make music, or are you going to start making meta music? Like, are you going to start creating the tools that a generation uses to make music? And so that's what I see you've done here with EAMIR, right?
Oh,
like, instead of just writing another piece, you've created the suite of tools that schools across the world can start using to generate to build the next generation of musicians.
If it becomes that, if it became that, I would be just so happy, and that'd be wonderful, and I'm happy to help out. That was part of the motivation for making it all open source, because look, I was a teacher too at that level. I know how difficult it is to get chalk in a classroom and all that stuff. So it's all free and it's all open. The Max book that I did, I think, speaks to how Max in itself just speaks to how easy it can be with a little sweat equity to get into this thing. They have a bunch of objects and patchers and things all optimized for music. This happens to do a very specific type of music. It does diatonic music, it does things, and you can do that. So having said all that, I should say the truth is that it was pretty much self-motivated. I was trying to solve these problems for myself. And it just so happened that there are other people out there that feel the same way that I do. And that's one thing that I have found all along the way with all these different pursuits, is that there are a lot of people that share unique pain points or pain points that we think are so, esoteric or just unique to us. But there are a lot of people saying like, that bothers me too. It's great that I can do this with a programming language. It's great that I can do that. But what I'm really interested in is I just want to make a thing that makes it easy for me to play chords in the key of C major. And that's not always so straightforward, how to actually do that. So
and that's another lesson that I think generalizes really well to whatever field you're in. I mean, when Jen and I were at Loop a couple of years ago, when they had it in Los Angeles, we were in the room at East West Studios. They had a studio filled because it was just the group of people talking about electronic music in schools. And somebody in the room stood up and said, last time we had Loop, there were 7 people in this room. So no matter how alone you feel in the pursuit that you're in, hang in there, because you will find your people. You will find your tribe.
That's exactly it. And if I may, I'll give my Manzo career advice. Like this is, if I know one thing, I know this to be true, is that people do not refuse free labor. So if you are looking to be a leader or just get involved, just be willing to volunteer your time and be willing to not even just like not get paid, but maybe spend a little bit of your own money on bus fare or gasoline or whatever like that. Just volunteer your time. Nobody refuses free help. No one does, unless you're terrible. But like even then, they'll find another job for you. So this to me is the critical advice, is just, you have great ideas, that's fine, but you never get to the point where you just say, I have a great idea, and a bunch of people come around you and say like, oh, sure thing, Mr. Unknown Person. What can I do? I'm going to stop what I'm doing to do. No, that's not how the world works. Just find someone who's doing something of interest and say, I would be willing to help you out for 3 hours a week in whatever capacity you need. They will not see your prowess as a programmer, an engineer, or a musician when they ask you to go get them bagels, and coffee. But if you come back with muffins and tea, they will know something about you. If you come back and you get them what they ask for, they will know something about you, and just being involved, being willing to work and not get paid for it. I know that sounds really crappy, in 2021 when, the economy is what it is, but
you mentioned going open source with EAMIR, right? So like I run into a lot of students who have a great idea, or Jen, you see this all the time. I mean, people approaching and saying, look, I have this like great beginning piece of a song, a discrete set of samples. I'm not going to show anybody because they'll steal them.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to hang on to them.
Yeah, I have some views on that. And when I first launched the Modal Object Library, I thought I had $1 million idea. Like now I laugh at myself for thinking that, because it's a really specific person. And someone emailed me and said, would you consider making this free? There's really not a whole lot of money to be made in that. And there's a very specific type of person that would benefit from this. And I thought, absolutely, what, that email alone really changed my mind, because first of all, patenting software is extremely difficult, as you would likely know. It is very, very difficult to get a patent for a piece of software. And it's not even something that really gets done that much anymore, a copyright or something else. But the idea that your idea is going to sit with just you until you get it to this point where you're able to do an unveiling, that is a really big gamble. You probably, and here's where ego plays in, you probably don't have the next Twitter, or the next Facebook on your hands. And if you're listening to this recording, you're in a very particular boat with people who are mostly artists. And we all know musicians, they're living on the breadline if they're, if a gig dries up. And so, you can make a pretty big impact just by saying, this is, if you want to do donation, you can buy me a cup of coffee or something like that. I'm in a different position too as an academic, but I tend to operate pretty much in the buy me a piece of, vegan pizza or something like that domain. If you can operate in the friend domain, you tend to get better work, by the way, too. Like I don't want to go into the whole data on that, but if you keep it in the realm where if I win, we all win, you get better results. If you pay someone $50, they do $50 worth of work, and also you don't want to be in this position where, you sell an app for $3 on the iOS store. That person owns you for the rest of that. That person upgrades their phone 20 times in lifetime. They demand it, and they will not be shy to write you the nastiest review. I paid $1 in 1994 for this thing. Can't believe that suck. Canceled. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So.
No. I've seen that on freeware.
Yeah.
You need to fix this now.
Exactly. Yeah. When you say it's open source, people lower their guard, quite a bit, like, okay, it's kind of broken and stuff like that. They take pity on you. All right. I get it. Yeah.
And I'm keeping my eye on the clock. We're down to our last few minutes. So if anyone in the room has questions, we have the question panel open. Feel free to type into the chat window.
I know. yeah, Kyle, did you have any questions? I know you're here. Oh, Nathan has a, let me see.
Jen, I think you have a class here, right? You know a lot of the people in the room.
I know, yeah, Kyle was talking about some sort of glove he bought. I mean, off of, I guess, from Imogen Heap type style. But
Yes.
yeah, did you want to ask anything about? I don't know if you can hear me, but if you wanted to ask anything about that, but
What do I do with it?
yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. There is, when you think about, here, I'm going to share my screen again for just 1 second. I won't.
Yeah, there he goes.
Okay. Oh, did the question come through in the chat or?
Yeah, I think it did. Do you see the question Q&A?
Yeah, the Mimu
Yeah, Mimu, yeah.
gloves. I mean, which we can have a more general, like, is there a limit? Do you think there's a limit to controllers? Are we reaching the end? I mean, we've got rings and we've got.
Yeah, okay. So here's the VJ Manzo 2 cents on this. You can see this picture of a violin.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a violin in case you've never seen one. So we've got variables in music, right? Pitches change, dynamics change. These are all like things that can be altered. Think about whatever instrument you play. Think about those musical variables. If you really dig, and then think about the control, which in this case is a bow. If you really dig into this instrument, you can change a lot of variables at one time. So you can change the dynamics by really digging in. You can also change the timbre, but based on where the bow is and also the angle of the bow. So not very many. It's pretty simple in its design, not a lot of moving parts in a violin. And so when you think about that compared to like, you know, like your average electronic music instrument, here's a picture of a buchla, you know, which is lots of variables that can change, you know, but there's an inaccessibility to the buchla. There's nothing really about the buchla that says play with me about the buchla, you know? And so while there are a variety of controllers out there that can give you gyroscopic data and send things from all sorts of sensors and give you stock quotes and all sorts of stuff, you know, mapping is everything. Blah. That's the end of it all. It's how do you want to map all of those things? Because if you don't find an interesting way to map that, then it's kind of in your way, and you almost don't want it. You know, everyone poo-poos on MIDI because it's 128 numbers to, you know, oh, it's bad resolution, it doesn't do these things. There are good reasons why MIDI has stuck around, you know, all this time. And one of it is that the mapping is pretty straightforward. These numbers go to these pitches. And if you were using floating point numbers, that's not so easy to program. You know, you have to think about that differently. And so with a lot of these controllers that are out there, which are fantastic and incredible, and I certainly am not denigrating them at all because they're great and they're sophisticated, like the Rolly C board, for example. This is a really interesting thing. It puts a burden on programmers to find interesting and thoughtful ways to map that data to musical things. And that can either be in the traditional sense that it's going to do, you know, operate and alter sounds in a traditional sense, or it could be in ways that we have not yet discovered. So it's the whole world, it's kind of wide open at this point. The danger, of course, is it's like a game of chicken. I don't want to force this glove to this one particular style of operation because then it precludes people from, you know, the kind of the flexibility of it there too. However, if you don't do that, then people don't know what to do with it, you know?
Right. That's right. That's a great point. I mean, it's kind of the corollary to that maybe is new musical instruments, right? I mean, complete new instruments. So there's a whole conference every year, right? On like just inventing new ways to create sounds.
Yeah. One of my favorites was all of these sensors in the bottom of a kiddie pool, and there's all worms in the kiddie pool. Incredible. Like, I mean, just the thought is not me, you know, it's not for me, but like, awesome. Wow. This is a fantastic idea. So yeah, all sorts of great ideas out there.
Well, and I know at the last, you mentioned the Max conference, and I think the last Max conference you presented on like a sonification idea, right?
Yes.
I mean, sonification is a whole nother interesting area of how does data become the controller, right? How does data map to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find some info on that on my website. That one was with a chemical engineer. Always nice if you can work with scientists, because they tend to have pockets of money to buy cool toys. We were looking at this thing called a Raman spectrometer, and I was like, oh, how much does that cost? $10,000 for one that's like not good. Like, oh my gosh. Compare that with like the cost of a glove, Endo Power glove, or something like that. Yeah, so it's just funny. Stuff is
thanks so much. I think we're coming up on the hour, and we want to make sure we respect your time, but we're so appreciative of meeting you and having you come to the college, even though it's a virtual space. If you're in the Philadelphia area, we're allowed to go out and breathe air in the future.
I look forward to it. Blackbird pizza, like I said, that's my jam. Yeah,
Got it.
Absolutely, we will do that. And thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. If anyone wants to get in touch, you can certainly pass along my information. And
terrific.
My website is there. I'm around. I love bouncing ideas around. So.
Oh, fantastic. We really appreciate it. VJ, thanks so much. It's been a really terrific hour, and we're really looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.